You are 12 minutes late, Holland. I know, Mr. Lancaster. I'm so sorry. The subway was stopped and... I didn't ask for the logistics of public transit. I asked why you are trembling. I ran all the way from the station, sir. Is that so? Then explain to me why you are favoring your left side. You aren't running, Holland. You're dragging your leg like a wounded animal trying to hide from a predator. And the thing about predators, we smell blood long before we see it. Sit down. Now. Welcome to a story of obsession, danger, and the blurred lines between protection and possession. This is The Maid apologized for being late. The Mafia Boss asked why she was limping. The elevator rose with a silence that felt pressurized, like a deep-sea dive in reverse. Holland Quinn watched the floor numbers tick upward on the digital display. Her reflection ghosted in the brushed steel doors. She looked pale. The fluorescent lights of the service elevator did her no favors, highlighting the sheen of cold sweat clinging to her hairline and the dark smudges of sleeplessness beneath her eyes. But it was the throbbing in her left thigh that consumed her world. It wasn't a dull ache. It was a sharp, biting scream of nerves that fired every time she shifted her weight. 12 minutes. She was 12 minutes late. In the world of normal employment, 12 minutes was a traffic jam, a spilled coffee, a forgivable offense. In the world of Damon Lancaster, 12 minutes was a breach of contract. It was chaos introduced into a system of perfect order. The door slid open on the 45th floor, revealing the foyer of the penthouse. The air here was different, scrubbed clean of the city's humidity, chilled to a precise 68 degrees, and smelling faintly of cedar and expensive, unscented leather. It was a glass fortress floating above the smog. Holland stepped out, gripping the strap of her canvas bag until her knuckles turned white. She forced herself to walk normally. Heel, toe, heel, toe. Don't wince. The main living area was a cavern of minimalism. Floor-to-ceiling windows exposed the sprawling urban grid of the city below, bathed in the harsh, golden glare of the morning sun. There was no rain to obscure the view today. The sky was a piercing, relentless blue that offered no comfort. Damon Lancaster stood by the far window, his back to her. He was wearing a charcoal vest over a white dress shirt. The sleeves rolled up to his elbows to reveal forearms that looked like they were carved from marble and corded with steel. He didn't turn around when her shoes clicked on the polished concrete floor. 12 minutes, he said. His voice was a low baritone, smooth but heavy, like a velvet shroud over a tombstone. Holland stopped by the kitchen island, dropping her bag. She needed to support herself against the marble counter, just for a second, to take the weight off the leg. I know, Mr. Lancaster. I am so incredibly sorry. The train at 42nd Street stalled between stations, and the signals were down, and I don't pay you for the weather report or the transit authority's incompetence, Damon said, finally turning. His face was a study in severe geometry, sharp jawline, high cheekbones, and eyes the color of oxidized copper. They were intelligent, predatory eyes that missed nothing. He didn't look angry. Angry would have been easier to handle. He looked disappointed, which, coming from a man rumored to have dissolved a business rival's assets, and perhaps the rival himself, in a single afternoon, was terrifying. It won't happen again, Holland whispered, grabbing the cleaning spray from her cart. She moved to start wiping down the pristine granite island, desperate to look busy, to look useful. I'll stay an extra hour to make up the time. Damon watched her. He didn't move. He stood with the stillness of a statue, his gaze tracking her movement. Holland sprayed the surface, her arm trembling slightly. She took a step to the left to reach a smudge, and her leg buckled. And it was a micro movement, a split-second failure of the muscle where the boot had connected with her flesh an hour ago. She caught herself on the counter, a sharp inhale hissing through her teeth. The silence that followed was deafening. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to vanish. "Stop!" Damon commanded. Holland froze, the rag hovering over the granite. "Sir?" Damon walked toward her. He didn't rush. His strides were long, eating up the distance between them with a predator's grace. He stopped 2 feet away, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of sandalwood soap and the metallic tang of something sharper. Gun oil? Ink? "Put the rag down," he said softly. She obeyed, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Walk to the window," he ordered. Holland swallowed hard. "I need to clean the... Walk to the window. She took a breath, steeling herself against the pain. She turned and took a step. She tried to mask it. She really did. She engaged every muscle in her core to keep her hips level, to suppress the limp. But the body doesn't lie, especially not when it's screaming. As she put weight on her left leg, her stride shortened, her shoulder dipped, and she dragged the foot slightly to avoid the full flexion of the muscle. "That's enough," Damon said. His voice was closer now. He had followed her. Holland turned back to face him. He was right there, looming over her, stealing the air from the room. "You're hurt," he stated, not asked. "I tripped." Holland lied instantly. The lie tasted like ash. "On the stairs, coming up from the subway. It's clumsy of me. I'm fine." Damon tilted his head, studying her face. He looked at the flush in her cheeks, the way her pupils were blown wide with adrenaline. "You tripped?" "Yes, sir." "On the stairs?" "Yes." "And yet," Damon murmured, stepping into her personal space, "your pants are not torn at the knee. Your hands are not scraped from catching a fall. You aren't favoring an ankle. You are guarding your thigh." He reached out. Holland flinched, pulling back. Damon's hand paused in midair, his eyes darkening. "Do not flinch away from me, Holland. I need to work, Mr. Lancaster. Please, you are of no use to me if you collapse in my hallway," Damon said coldly. "And I don't like liars in my house. The last person who lied to me is currently finding it very difficult to find employment in this hemisphere." He pointed to one of the high-backed leather bar stools. "Sit, Mr. Lancaster. Really, it's just a bruise. Sit down, Holland, or I will carry you to that chair myself. And I promise you, I will be less gentle than you are hoping for." The threat hung in the air, heavy and real. Holland looked at his face and saw zero negotiation. She limped to the stool and sat, the relief of taking the weight off her leg almost making her dizzy. Damon moved to stand in front of her. He placed his hands on the arms of the chair, boxing her in. "Now, tell me the truth. Who touched you?" The question wasn't how did you get hurt. It was who touched you. Holland looked away, staring at the perfectly polished buttons of his vest. "I was mugged," she whispered. 3 blocks from the station. A guy in a hoodie. He wanted my bag. I didn't give it to him." Damon's jaw tightened. "You fought a mugger for a canvas bag containing what? A library card and a granola bar?" "My rent money," she snapped, a flash of defensive anger cutting through the fear. "I had my rent money in cash. I couldn't lose it." Damon stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. And he kicked me. Hard. Then a police cruiser turned the corner, and he ran." Damon stood up straight, crossing his arms. He seemed to be processing the information, dissecting it for flaws. "Show me." Holland's eyes snapped to his. "Excuse me. The injury. Show me." "I can't. I'm not taking my pants off, Mr. Lancaster. I have seen more skin in a morgue than I care to recall, and I have seen more women in this city than you have seen hot meals. Your modesty is irrelevant to the situation. Roll up the pant leg, or I call the doctor to cut it off." It wasn't a sexual demand. It was clinical. It was an inspection of damaged property. Holland hesitated, her fingers trembling as she reached for the hem of her loose-fitting work trousers. She slowly rolled the fabric up, over her calf, over the knee, revealing the skin of her lower thigh. The silence in the room dropped several degrees. There, blooming across her pale skin, was not just a bruise. It was a massive, violent hematoma, turning shades of angry purple, black, and sickly yellow. But it wasn't just a blob. The imprint was distinct. The tread of a heavy, military-grade boot was stamped clearly into her flesh, the outline of the steel toe distinct and cruel. Damon looked at the bruise. Then he looked at her face. His eyes had changed. The copper was gone, replaced by a flat, dead black. "That," Damon said, his voice terrifyingly quiet, "is not the footprint of a street mugger in a hoodie." Damon Lancaster did not tolerate imperfection. His life was a carefully curated symphony of control. His business dealings were precise, his enemies were managed, and his home was a sanctuary of absolute order. Holland Quinn was a disruption. He stared at the violent mark on her leg. A street thug wore sneakers, maybe cheap work boots. They kicked wildly. This blow was tactical. It was placed specifically to incapacitate the sciatic nerve. It was a debilitating strike executed with a heavy-soled combat boot, a standard issue for private security firms, or mercenaries. Holland was trying to pull the fabric back down, her face burning with humiliation. "It looks worse than it is," she mumbled. Damon caught her wrist. His grip was firm, hot against her cold skin. "Leave it!" He turned and walked to the refrigerator, opening the freezer drawer. He bypassed the ice maker and grabbed a gel pack, one of the medical-grade ones he kept for his own post-boxing recovery. He wrapped it in a linen towel, Irish linen, costing more than Holland's entire outfit, and returned to her. He didn't hand it to her. He knelt. The sight of Damon Lancaster, the man who owned half the waterfront and most of the city council, kneeling on his own concrete floor in front of his cleaning lady, was so absurd, Holland almost laughed. But the look on his face stopped her. He pressed the ice pack gently against the swelling. Holland hissed, her hands gripping the seat of the stool. "Breathe," he commanded, his eyes still fixed on the injury. "The cold will shock the nerves." "I can hold it," she said breathlessly. "You can't even hold your own weight right now," he countered. "Tell me exactly what happened. The man. Describe him." Holland looked down at the top of his head. His hair was dark, almost black, styled with a precision that defied gravity. He was average height, wearing a gray hoodie like I said, but he had a scarf or a mask over his face. "Did he speak?" "He said..." Holland paused, the memory surfacing with a fresh wave of nausea. "He said, 'Wrong door, bitch.'" Damon's hand froze on the ice pack. He looked up slowly. "Repeat that." He said, "Wrong door." I thought he meant I was at the wrong entrance to the subway or something. It didn't make sense. Damon slowly stood up, leaving the ice pack balanced on her leg. He walked over to the wall where a high-tech intercom panel was mounted. He pressed a button. "Silas, come to the penthouse. Bring the med kit. The trauma one." Holland's eyes widened. "Mr. Lancaster, I don't need a trauma kit. I just need some ibuprofen in 10 minutes. Damon ignored her. He was pacing now, a tiger in a cage. "You were 3 blocks away. Which intersection?" 5th and Grand, by the old newsstand. "That is not your usual route. The construction on 4th forced me to detour." Damon stopped pacing. He looked out the window, his mind clearly working through a complex algorithm of threats and variables. "Construction on 4th doesn't start until next week. I own the construction company." Holland blinked. There were barriers up, orange cones, men in vests. Damon turned back to her, a dark realization dawning on his face. "It was a funnel," he murmured to himself. "They funneled foot traffic to a kill zone." "A what?" Holland asked, her voice trembling. "Mr. Lancaster, you're scaring me. It was just a mugging." "Holland," Damon said, saying her name with a weight he had never used before. He walked back to her, leaning in close, his hands resting on either side of her hips on the stool, trapping her. "Do you know who I am?" You're a businessman. You work in imports." "I am a businessman, yes. But the business is dangerous, and people who want to hurt me usually can't get close to me. So they look for cracks in the wall. They look for the people who come and go, the delivery drivers, the maintenance crew." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "The maid." Holland felt the blood drain from her face. You think they attacked me because of you?" "I think," Damon said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "that someone wanted to send a message." "Wrong door." "They were telling you that you walked into a world you don't belong in." The elevator chimed. The door slid open and a man stepped out. Silas was massive, a mountain of a man with a shaved head and a neck thick with muscle. He carried a large black duffel bag. "Boss?" Silas rumbled, his eyes flicking to Holland, then to the bruise exposed on her leg. He didn't look surprised, he looked resigned. "Check her for trackers," Damon ordered, stepping back. "Trackers!" Holland shrieked, trying to stand up, but the pain forced her back down. "What are you talking about?" "Stand up, Holland," Damon said, his voice devoid of pity. "Drop the bag on the floor." "No! That's my private!" Silas moved faster than a man his size should be able to. He gently but firmly took the canvas bag from her hands and dumped the contents onto the pristine kitchen island. Keys, wallet, a crumbled granola bar wrapper, a folded paperback romance novel, a stick of lip balm. and a small, black rectangular device that looked like a USB drive, but thicker. Holland stared at the device. I've never seen that. That's not mine. Damon picked up the device with a handkerchief from his pocket. He held it up to the light. A tiny red LED blinked once, slowly. Audio bug and GPS, Silas noted, his voice flat. Active. Damon looked at Holland. She was shaking now, terrifying. Uncontrollable tremors racking her body. She looked small, fragile, and utterly out of her depth. They didn't want your rent money, Holland, Damon said, crushing the device in his hand until the plastic casing cracked. They wanted a way inside. He tossed the broken electronics to Silas. Sweep the lobby, check the perimeter, and lock down the elevators. No one in or out. Mr. Lancaster, Holland whispered, tears finally spilling over. I want to go home. Please. Damon looked at her. For a second, the mask slipped. There was something else in his eyes. Regret? Guilt? No, it was resolve. You can't go home, Holland, he said, walking toward the panic room concealed behind a bookshelf. They marked you. If you leave this building, you'll be dead within the hour. The concept of captivity is relative. For the last 3 hours, Holland had been sitting on a couch that likely cost more than her father's life insurance payout. She was surrounded by art that belonged in museums. She was drinking water from a crystal tumbler. And yet, she was a prisoner. Damon had disappeared into his office, a glass-walled room that he had frosted with the touch of a button. Immediately after the lockdown, Silas was standing by the elevator doors, arms crossed, a silent sentinel who hadn't blinked in 45 minutes. Holland stared at her leg. Silas had applied a compression bandage and given her a pill that had dulled the sharpest edge of the pain, leaving her feeling floaty and detached. But the fear was still sharp. They marked you. She replayed the morning in her head. The detour, the empty street, the man in the hoodie, the kick. She remembered the way he had leaned in after she fell, his hand brushing against her bag. She had thought he was trying to snatch it. He had been planting the bug. She was a mule, a Trojan horse designed to walk straight into the heart of Damon Lancaster's fortress. The frosted glass of the office cleared instantly. Damon stepped out. He had removed the vest. His tie was gone, the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone. He looked like a man who had just finished a war, or started one. He walked straight to the living area, ignoring Silas. He stopped in front of the coffee table where Holland sat. My security team has reviewed the footage from the street cameras, Damon said. He held a tablet in his hand. Do you recognize this man? He thrust the screen toward her. It was a grainy still frame, zoomed in. The man in the hoodie had the mask pulled down for a split second as he turned a corner away from the attack. Holland squinted. The face was scarred, rough. No, I've never seen him. His name is Markov. He works for the Volkov Syndicate. Damon pulled the tablet back. Russians, brutal, efficient, and usually, they stay in Brighton Beach. Why? Holland's voice cracked. She cleared her throat. Why do they want you? Damon placed the tablet on the table with a heavy thud. He sat down on the coffee table, directly across from her, invading her space again. This time, he didn't look threatening. He looked intense. Because I took something of theirs. A shipment. They want it back. Or they want equal value in blood. So give it back, Holland pleaded. If they're killing people. It's not that simple, Holland. In my world, restitution is seen as weakness. If I give it back, they will see that I can be pressured. Then, they will come for everything else. He looked at her bandage. How is the pain? Manageable, she said softly. Am I fired? Damon actually laughed. It was a short, dry sound, devoid of humor. Fired? Holland, you are currently the most valuable intelligence asset in the room. I'm a maid. You are a witness. And you are the victim of a direct act of aggression against the Lancaster family. That puts you under my protection. I don't want your protection. I want to go to my apartment. I have a cat. I have bills. Your cat will be retrieved. Your bills will be paid. But you are not leaving. Damon stood up, walking to the wet bar. He poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a glass. He didn't offer her any. You can't keep me here, Holland said, a spark of defiance rising through the painkillers. This is kidnapping. Damon turned, glass in hand. He took a slow sip, his eyes locking onto hers. Kidnapping implies I am holding you for ransom. I am holding you for survival. If you walk out that door, Markov will finish what he started. He knows the bug was destroyed. He knows the signal went dead inside my penthouse. That means he knows you made it inside. To him, you are now a loose end. He walked back to her, leaning down so his face was level with hers. I am a bad man, Holland. I have done terrible things. But I do not let innocent women die because they had the misfortune of cleaning my floors. You stay here. You stay in my sight. And you do exactly what I tell you. For how long? Until I wipe the Volkovs off the map, Damon said calmly. Could be 2 days. Could be 2 weeks. Holland stared at him. The absurdity of the situation crashed into the reality of his intense, terrifying charisma. She was trapped in a glass cage with a tiger because the wolves were waiting outside. I need clothes, she said, her voice small. I can't wear a uniform for 2 weeks. Damon's gaze raked over her, lingering on the fraying hem of her cheap uniform top. No, you can't. He pulled a phone from his pocket and dialed a number. Silas, have the stylist send over a wardrobe. Size? He looked at Holland, assessing her with a glance that felt like a physical touch. Size 4. Shoes, size 7. Casual, but functional. And get comfortable sleeping arrangements set up in the guest suite. The blue room. He hung up and looked at her. You're limping, he said, circling back to the beginning. But you're still standing. That's good. I like resilience. I don't have a choice, Holland muttered. We never do, Damon replied. Suddenly the lights in the penthouse flickered. Once, twice. Then the entire apartment plunged into darkness. The hum of the air conditioning died. The electronic locks on the elevator clicked loudly. Total silence. In the darkness, the city lights below cast long, skeletal shadows across the room. Holland gasped, clutching the sofa cushions. Silas! Damon's voice was a whip crack in the dark. Systems are down, boss. Hardline cut. Jamming signal detected. Damon moved. Holland couldn't see him, but she felt the air displace as he rushed toward her. A hand, strong, calloused, grabbed her arm. Get up! Damon hissed in her ear. They didn't wait for the bug. They're coming up. Coming up? How? The stairs, Damon said, pulling her off the couch. She cried out as her leg protested. But he didn't stop. He wrapped an arm around her waist, lifting her almost entirely off the ground. 45 flights. They'll be tired, but they'll be heavily armed. He dragged her toward the darkness of the hallway. I told you, Holland, you're not the maid anymore. He kicked open the door to the panic room, shoving her inside into the pitch black. He didn't follow immediately. He stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the faint moonlight. A gun appeared in his hand, a sleek, dark shape. You're the bait, he whispered. And then he closed the heavy steel door, locking her in the dark. The darkness inside the panic room was absolute. It wasn't just the absence of light, it was a physical weight, pressing against Holland's chest, suffocating her. She sat huddled in the corner, knees drawn up to her chin, flinching at every sound that penetrated the heavy steel door. The walls were insulated, designed to keep the world out, but they couldn't block the vibrations. Thud, a heavy impact, like a body hitting the floor. Crack, crack, crack. Gunfire. Short, controlled bursts. Not the chaotic spray of a street fight, but the rhythmic, terrifying cadence of professionals at work. Holland clamped her hands over her ears, tears streaming hot and fast down her cheeks. You're the bait, Damon had whispered. The words echoed in the small, airless space. He had thrown her in here not just to protect her, but to lure them in. He had known they would come for her. The weak link, the Trojan horse. She checked her watch, illuminating the face with a press of a button. The green glow was the only light in the universe. 11 minutes had passed since he locked the door. It felt like 11 years. Then, silence. The shooting stopped. The shouting died away. The silence was worse than the noise. In the noise, there was life, struggle. In the silence, there was only the unknown. Had Damon won? Or was that heavy silence the sound of men with scarred faces moving through the penthouse, looking for the girl who led them there? Holland held her breath. A metallic clack echoed from the door mechanism. The heavy bolts were retracting. She scrambled backward, pressing her spine against the cold metal wall, grabbing a heavy flashlight from the emergency shelf, the only weapon she could find. She held it like a club, shaking. The door swung open. Light flooded in. Not the warm sunlight from the floor-to-ceiling windows, but the harsh white beam of a tactical flashlight. It blinded her. "Put it down, Holland." The voice was rough, breathless. "Damon." Holland lowered the flashlight, blinking spots from her vision. Damon stood in the doorway. He looked like a nightmare brought to life. His white dress shirt was ruined, soaked in red on the right sleeve and splattered across the chest. His hair, usually perfect, was wild. He held a pistol in his right hand, the barrel pointing at the floor, smoke still curling lazily from the muzzle. Are you hurt?" she stammered, her gaze glued to the blood on his sleeve. "Not mine," Damon said grimly. He stepped inside, grabbing her arm with his free hand. His grip was bruising. "We have to move. The police response time in this district is 6 minutes. We have 4 left." He pulled her out of the room. The penthouse was a war zone. The pristine, minimalist furniture was overturned. The glass partition of his office was shattered. Millions of diamonds scattered across the concrete floor. And there were bodies. 3 men in tactical gear lay motionless near the kitchen island. The same island she had been cleaning 20 minutes ago. Holland gagged, turning her face into Damon's shoulder to avoid looking at the carnage. He didn't coddle her. He kept moving, dragging her toward the kitchen. "Don't look," he ordered, his voice devoid of emotion. "Step where I step. There's glass everywhere." "The elevator is locked down," Holland gasped, limping heavily. The adrenaline that had masked her pain was fading, and her leg was screaming again. "We aren't taking the elevator," Damon said. He moved to the large, stainless steel refrigerator and yanked it open. He wasn't looking for food. He reached inside, tripping a hidden latch behind the wine rack. The entire back wall of the refrigerator swung inward, revealing a dark, narrow shaft with a steel ladder and a pulley system. "Service chute," Damon explained, holstering his weapon. "Go! Now!" "I can't climb a ladder, Damon! My leg!" Damon cursed, a sharp, violent sound. He looked at her leg, then at the shaft, then at the digital timer on his watch. "Fine!" Before she could protest, he swept her up into his arms, bridal style. He didn't grimace, didn't stumble. The strength of the man was terrifying. He stepped into the shaft, hooking one arm around the cable of the pulley system. "Hold on to my neck," he commanded, "and do not scream. If you scream, I drop you." He kicked the release lever. The counterweight disengaged and they plummeted into the dark. The drop was a controlled freefall that left Holland's stomach somewhere on the 45th floor. The cable whined, a high-pitched shriek of metal on metal as they descended through the spine of the building. They jerked to a halt in the sub-basement, a concrete bunker smelling of damp earth and grease. Damon carried her out of the chute, kicking the door of a parked vehicle. It wasn't a luxury sedan. It was a matte black SUV, armored, with tires that looked like they could crush a small car. He opened the passenger door and deposited her on the leather seat. "Buckle up," he said, slamming the door before she could adjust her leg. He vaulted into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life with a guttural growl that vibrated through the floorboards. "Where is Silas?" Holland asked, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the seatbelt. "Silas is cleaning up the mess," Damon said, throwing the car into gear. "He'll meet us at the rendezvous." The garage door groaned open, and Damon floored it. The SUV shot out of the underground exit into the blinding daylight of the alleyway. He didn't slow down for the street. He swerved into traffic, horns blaring around them as he weaved through the gridlock with surgical precision. Holland gripped the dashboard handle. "You said I was bait," she said, the anger finally breaking through the shock. "You threw me in that room and waited for them." Damon's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, checking for a tail. "I calculated the risk. The panic room is the safest place in the city. It can withstand a rocket-propelled grenade. You were never in danger inside the vault." "That's not the point!" Holland yelled, turning to face him. "You used me! You let me think I was going to die!" "Would you have preferred to stand in the hallway and negotiate?" Damon snapped. "They were coming to kill us, Holland, not chat. I used the element of surprise. They focused on the panic room door, thinking I was inside with you. That gave me the angle to flank them." "You're a psychopath." "I'm alive," Damon corrected. "And so are you. You're welcome." He took a sharp right, the tires screeching. Holland hissed in pain as her leg slammed against the center console. Damon's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. He reached into the center console without looking, pulling out a small plastic bottle of pills. He tossed it into her lap. "Tramadol," he said. "Take one. Only one." Holland stared at the bottle. "I don't want your drugs." "Take the pill, Holland. You're in shock, and your pain levels are spiking. If you pass out, you become dead weight. I can't carry you and shoot at the same time." It was the cold logic that infuriated her, but the throbbing in her thigh was becoming unbearable. She dry swallowed a pill, glaring at him. "Where are we going?" "Safe house. Upstate." "My cat." "Silas has the cat," Damon interrupted. "He picked it up before he came to the penthouse. It's in a carrier in the trunk of his car." Holland blinked. You sent your bodyguard to get my cat before the shooting started?" "I told you," Damon said, his voice softening just a fraction. "I am thorough." They hit the highway, leaving the skyline behind. Damon drove fast, the speedometer hovering at triple digits, but he seemed relaxed now. The tension in his shoulders had dropped. Holland studied his profile. The blood on his shirt was drying to a rusty brown. There was a cut on his cheekbone, a thin red line where a shard of glass must have grazed him. "You're bleeding," she said softly. Damon touched his cheek, looking at the blood on his fingertips as if surprised to find it there. "Collateral damage. Does this happen often?" "Attacks? Occasionally. Attempts to breach the penthouse? Never." He glanced at her. "You were the key, Holland. They've been watching the building for months, looking for a pattern. They found you. A creature of habit. Same train. Same time. Predictable. I'm sorry for being boring. I didn't say boring, I said consistent. In my world, consistency is usually a survival trait. Today, it was a liability." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the engine and the rush of wind. The cityscape faded, replaced by the green blur of trees and the gray ribbon of the highway. Holland felt the pill kicking in. Her eyelids grew heavy. The fear was receding, replaced by a strange, floating sensation. She looked at Damon, the monster who had saved her, the savior who had used her. "Why didn't you just fire me?" she mumbled, her words slurring slightly. "Last week, when I broke the vase." Damon looked at her. For the first time, he looked tired. "Because," he said quietly, thinking she was already asleep, "you were the only thing in that apartment that felt real." Holland wanted to ask what he meant, but the darkness pulled her under. Holland woke to the sound of gravel crunching under tires. She opened her eyes, disoriented. The sky was violet. Dusk was settling in. They were no longer on the highway. They were driving up a long, winding driveway, lined with towering pine trees that blocked out the rest of the world. Ahead, a structure emerged from the gloom. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress of concrete and glass, cantilevered over a rushing river. It looked cold, modern, and impenetrable. "We're here," Damon said, stopping the car in front of a heavy steel door. He got out and came around to her side. Holland unbuckled her belt, trying to move her leg. It was stiff. The muscle seized up, but the sharp agony was dulled to a heavy throb. "I can walk," she said, pushing his hands away as he reached for her. Damon stepped back, raising an eyebrow. "Be my guest." She swung her legs out, planting her feet on the gravel. She stood, took one step, and immediately pitched forward as her knee gave way. Damon caught her before she hit the ground, his arm hooked around her waist, pulling her flush against his chest. She could feel the heat radiating from him, the solid wall of muscle beneath the ruined shirt. "Stubbornness is a virtue," Damon murmured into her hair, "until it becomes stupidity. Lean on me." He didn't pick her up this time. He let her walk, taking most of her weight as he guided her toward the door. He punched a code into a keypad, and the heavy door hissed open. Inside, the house was dark and silent. Damon flipped a switch, and warm amber lights illuminated a vast open space with polished concrete floors, heavy leather furniture, and a fireplace big enough to roast a boar. He led her to a massive leather sofa and helped her sit. "Stay," he ordered. "I need to secure the perimeter and check the comms." He disappeared down a hallway. Holland looked around. The place was beautiful, but sterile. No photos, No knickknacks. Just architecture and expensive silence. She leaned back, closing her eyes. Her life had imploded in the span of 12 hours. 10 minutes later, Damon returned. He had changed. He was wearing black sweatpants and a clean black t-shirt. His face was washed, the blood gone. Though the cut on his cheek was still angry and red, he carried a first aid kit, a real one, not the travel size. He pulled a coffee table over and sat on it, facing her. "Pants," he said. Holland sighed. "We really need to stop meeting like this." Damon's lip twitched, almost a smile. "Roll them up." She complied. The bruise was worse now. It had spread, a dark galaxy of purple and black consuming her thigh. Damon inspected it with clinical detachment, probing the edges with his fingers. His hands were cool, his touch surprisingly gentle for a man who killed people for a living. "No structural damage to the bone," he assessed. "But the muscle fiber is torn. You're going to be off your feet for a week." He opened a tube of gel, something that smelled like menthol and arnica, and began to massage it into the bruise. Holland gasped, gripping the cushions. "That hurts." "It needs to circulate," Damon said, not stopping. His thumbs worked the knot in the muscle, digging deep. The intimacy of it was overwhelming. Here, in this quiet house in the woods, the power dynamic felt shifted. He wasn't the boss behind the desk. He was a man, tending to a wound. "Damon," she said, using his first name for the first time. He didn't look up, but his hands paused. "Who are the Volkovs? Really?" Damon resumed the massage, his movements slower now. "They are arms dealers. They move things that shouldn't be moved across borders that shouldn't be crossed." "And you?" Holland asked. "You said you're an importer." "I am," Damon said, finally looking up. His eyes were dark, bottomless. "I import order. I export chaos. The Volkovs were bringing something into the city that I didn't approve of, a new synthetic drug, highly addictive, highly lethal. I intercepted the shipment and destroyed it." "So you're the good guy?" Damon laughed, a low rumble in his chest. "No, Holland, I'm not the good guy. I just have a different set of rules. The Volkovs kill for profit. I kill for stability." He finished with the gel and began wrapping her thigh in a fresh compression bandage. "Why didn't you tell me?" Holland asked. "If I was in danger." "I didn't know they would target the staff," Damon admitted. He secured the bandage with a metal clip. "That was a miscalculation. A failure. I don't like failures." He stood up, towering over her. "And I pay my debts." Holland looked up at him. "Is that what this is? Paying a debt?" "You took a hit meant for my operation. You're here because I owe you safety. And when the debt is paid?" Damon stared at her. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with an electricity that had nothing to do with the storm brewing outside. "Then we renegotiate," he said softly. A loud chime from the hallway broke the moment. Damon turned instantly, the softness vanishing, the soldier returning. "That's the gate sensor," he said, his voice hard. "Silas isn't due for another hour." He moved to a panel on the wall, tapping the screen. He cursed. "Who is it?" Holland asked, panic rising in her throat again. Damon watched the screen. "It's not the Russians." "Then who?" "The police," Damon said, turning to her. "Or rather, the police on Volkov's payroll. They found the car." He walked back to her, extending a hand. "Can you walk? Or do I carry you?" "I can walk," Holland lied, taking his hand. "Good," Damon said, pulling her up. "Because we aren't running this time. We're staying." Holland's eyes widened. "What?" Damon pulled a shotgun from under the sofa. Holland hadn't even seen it there. He racked the slide, the sound loud and final. "This is my house," Damon said, his eyes burning with cold fury. "And nobody kicks down my door twice in one day." The timeline of violence is often measured in seconds, but waiting for it is measured in heartbeats. Damon didn't hide Holland in a closet. He placed her in the control room, a small, windowless bunker behind the kitchen pantry, lined with monitors displaying every angle of the property's exterior. "Do not come out," Damon said, checking the load on the shotgun one last time. "No matter what you hear, if the door to this room opens and it isn't me or Silas, you use this." He handed her a small, heavy revolver. It felt cold and alien in her palm. "Damon, watch the screens, Holland. Be my eyes if the sensors fail." He closed the door, sealing her in with the glowing blue light of the monitors. Holland stared at the screens. The perimeter cameras showed 2 squad cars moving slowly up the gravel drive, their lights off. A third vehicle, an unmarked sedan, trailed behind. Men spilled out, 6 of them. They wore police uniforms, but their movements were wrong. They were too loose, too aggressive. They moved like hitmen in costumes. On the main feed, she saw Damon. He wasn't hiding. He stood in the center of the glass-walled living room, the shotgun resting casually against his shoulder, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked like a king waiting for peasants to bow. The front door exploded inward. It wasn't a knock. It was a battering ram. The glass shattered, raining shards onto the polished concrete. "Police!" a voice roared. "Hands where we can see them!" Damon didn't flinch. He took a sip of his drink. "You're outside your jurisdiction, Sergeant, and you're trespassing on private property." "We have a warrant for a vehicle involved in a homicide," the lead officer shouted, raising his service weapon. The other 5 fanned out, their boots crunching on the glass. "I don't see a warrant," Damon said calmly. "I see 6 men on a Russian payroll who think a badge is a shield. It isn't." The lead officer signaled, "Take him down." Holland gasped as the room erupted. Damon moved with a speed that defied physics. He dropped the glass, the crystal shattering as he dove behind the heavy leather sofa. The room filled with the deafening crack, crack, crack of pistol fire. Bullets tore into the leather, sending puffs of stuffing into the air. Damon returned fire. The shotgun boomed, a deep, chest-rattling sound. Boom, chick-chick, boom! 2 of the officers went down, screaming, clutching their legs. He wasn't shooting to kill, he was shooting to dismantle. "Flank him!" someone screamed. Holland watched on the monitor as 2 men circled around the back of the house, heading for the terrace door. "Damon!" she screamed at the screen, though he couldn't hear her. "Behind you!" But he knew. He had triggered a silent alarm on his watch. As the men reached the terrace door, high-pressure sprinklers erupted from the ground, not with water, but with a thick white chemical fog. Tear gas. The men outside doubled over, retching and clawing at their eyes. Inside, the firefight was brutal and short. Damon used the environment like a weapon. He threw a heavy marble bust. He flipped a table for cover. He moved constantly, never letting them pin him down. Then, a new sound cut through the chaos. A high-pitched whine followed by the roar of an engine. Silas had arrived. The massive bodyguard didn't park. He drove his car straight through the already broken front entrance, the hood of the sedan smashing into the 2 remaining standing officers, pinning them against the wall. It was violent, messy, and effective. Silence fell over the house again, broken only by the groans of the injured men and the hissing of the tear gas outside. Holland's door opened. She raised the revolver with shaking hands. "Easy," Damon said. He was breathing hard, sweat shining on his forehead, but he was unharmed. "It's over." He took the gun from her hands and pulled her into a hug. It wasn't gentle this time. It was desperate. He buried his face in her neck, his chest heaving against hers. "I told you," he whispered fiercely. "Nobody touches you." The police, the real police, the ones Damon had on his payroll, arrived an hour later to clean up the mess. The corrupt officers were zip-tied and loaded into vans, destined for a very unpleasant interrogation. Silas was coordinating the cleanup crew, men in hazmat suits scrubbing blood from the concrete. Damon and Holland sat on the terrace, overlooking the river. The adrenaline had crashed, leaving Holland feeling hollowed out and shivering. Damon draped a heavy wool blanket over her shoulders. He sat next to her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "You're shaking," he said. "I watched you shoot people, Damon. I defended us. I know, that's the scary part. I'm not scared of you. I'm scared for you." Damon turned to look at her. The moonlight reflected in the river below, casting dancing shadows on his face. "Don't be. This is the life. It's ugly. It's violent. And it ends one of 2 ways. Prison or a pine box. Is that what you want?" "It's what I am," Damon said simply. "I was born into this. My father was a shark. My grandfather was a shark. I just learned how to wear a better suit." "You're not a shark," Holland said, pulling the blanket tighter. "Sharks don't care about their maids. Sharks don't carry people down elevator shafts." Damon looked away, staring at the dark water. "You aren't the maid anymore, Holland. We established that." "Then what am I?" The question hung in the cold air. Damon reached out, his hand covering hers on the armrest, his fingers laced with hers, a slow, deliberate claiming, "You are the only person who has ever seen me covered in blood and didn't run away. You are essential." Holland's heart hammered against her ribs. Essential is a business term. "I don't know the other terms," Damon admitted, his voice rough. "I don't know how to do soft. I don't know how to do safe. But I know that the thought of you being hurt makes me want to burn the world down. Does that count?" Holland squeezed his hand. "It counts." They sat in silence for a long time. "The Volkovs aren't done," Holland said eventually. "They sent dirty cops. They'll send more." "No," Damon said, his eyes hardening. "They won't, because tonight we finish it. I'm not waiting for the next attack. I'm taking the fight to them." "We?" Holland asked. Damon looked at her. He assessed her, the set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes that hadn't been extinguished by the terror of the night. "Yes," he decided. "We. I need you to do something for me, Holland. It's dangerous, but it's the only way to end this without a war." "What do I have to do?" "Walk into the lion's den," Damon said, "and pretend you own the place." The Volkov headquarters was not a warehouse. It was a high-end nightclub in the meatpacking district, pulsing with bass and smelling of expensive vodka and danger. Damon Lancaster walked in through the front door. He wasn't hiding. He wore a tuxedo, looking for all the world like he was there to buy the building. On his arm was Holland Quinn. She was unrecognizable. The stylist Damon had called had performed a miracle. The limping maid in the uniform was gone. In her place was a vision in emerald green silk, a gown that hugged every curve and slit high up the thigh, revealing the bandage which was now covered by black lace, making it look like an avant-garde fashion statement. Her hair was swept up, her makeup sharp enough to cut glass. She leaned on Damon, not just for the role, but for support. Her legs still ached, but the adrenaline was a potent anesthetic. "Head high," Damon whispered in her ear as the bouncer stepped aside, intimidated by the sheer force of his presence. "You are the queen. They are just subjects." They were led to the VIP section, a balcony overlooking the dance floor. Sitting there, surrounded by bodyguards, was Alexei Volkov. He was an older man, scarred and bloated, drinking straight from a bottle of clear liquid. He laughed when he saw them. A booming, mocking sound. "Lancaster!" Volkov roared over the music. "You have balls. I give you that. You kill my men. You hospitalize my police. And then you come to my club? And you bring a dessert?" He gestured lewdly at Holland. Damon didn't sit. He stood by the railing, looking bored. Holland stood next to him, her hand resting casually on his chest. She could feel his heart beating, slow, steady. He wasn't afraid. "I came to return something you lost," Damon said, his voice cutting through the noise. "My shipment," Volkov sneered. "You destroyed it." "No," Damon said. "I confiscated it, and then I had it analyzed." He snapped his fingers. Holland reached into her clutch. She didn't pull out a gun. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. She unfolded it and placed it on the table in front of Volkov. "Chemical analysis," Holland said, her voice steady and clear. "The synthetic opioid you're pushing, it has a flaw, a degradation compound. If it gets above 70 degrees, it turns into pure cyanide." Volkov's smile vanished. He snatched the paper. "You're selling poison, Alexei," Damon said. "Not the fun kind. The kind that kills your customers instantly. If that shipment had hit the streets, you wouldn't just have the police after you. You'd have the cartel, the triad. Everyone who buys from you would turn on you because you sold them a suicide pill." "Lies," Volkov hissed. "Check the formula," Holland said, pointing to a chemical chain on the paper. "My father was a chemist. I know how to read a spectrograph. You cooked it wrong." It was a lie. Her father was a plumber. Damon had briefed her on the script in the car, but she sold it. She looked at the Russian mobster with the disdain of a disappointed professor. Volkov looked at the paper, then at Damon. Sweat broke out on his forehead. If this was true, his entire operation was dead. "What do you want?" Volkov asked, his voice low. I want you out of my city, Damon said. Tonight. You take your men, you take your poison, and you go back to Brighton Beach. You stay there. If I see one of your hoodies south of Prospect Park again, I release this report to the cartel. They won't arrest you, Alexei. They will skin you. Volkov stared at him. He looked at the dance floor, at his guards, at the paper. He knew he was checkmated. He couldn't risk a war with the cartels on a rumor. You are a devil, Lancaster, Volkov spat. I'm a businessman, Damon corrected. And I'm closing this account. He offered his arm to Holland. Come, darling. The music here is terrible. They turned and walked away. They didn't run. They didn't look back. They walked out of the club, past the guards, past the confused dancers, and into the cool night air. Only when they were in the back of the waiting limousine, with Silas behind the wheel, did Holland finally exhale. She collapsed against the leather seat, shaking. Did he buy it? She gasped. He bought it, Damon said, loosening his tie. Fear makes men irrational. He won't risk checking the science. My father was a plumber, Holland laughed, a hysterical bubbling sound. I can't believe I said that. Damon looked at her. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His expression was soft, full of an emotion that he was finally allowing to surface. You were perfect, he whispered. He leaned in. Holland didn't pull away. She leaned forward, closing the gap. When he kissed her, it tasted like whiskey and victory. It was a promise. A contract signed not in ink, but in breath and blood. 3 months later, the elevator to the penthouse chimed. The doors opened. Holland Quinn stepped out. She wasn't wearing a uniform. She was wearing a tailored navy suit and heels. Heels that clicked rhythmically on the concrete. The limp was gone, healed by the best physical therapist money could buy, though a thin silver scar remained on her thigh. A reminder. She walked to the kitchen island, placing a sleek briefcase on the granite, and Damon was by the window on the phone. He turned when he heard her. He hung up without saying goodbye. You're early, he said, a smile touching his eyes. I learned from the best, Holland replied. Traffic was light, and the meeting with the zoning board went well. We have the permits for the new warehouse. We? Damon asked, walking over to her. We, Holland confirmed. She adjusted his tie, her fingers lingering on the silk. Unless you need me to dust the shelves? Damon laughed, pulling her close. I think we can hire someone for that. I have a new position in mind for you. Oh? And what's the job title? Damon kissed her forehead, then her lips. Partner. The city sprawled below them, a kingdom of lights and shadows. It was a dangerous world, full of predators and traps. But as Holland looked out at the skyline, wrapped in the arms of the most dangerous man in the city, she realized she wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't the prey. She was part of the pack. And that is how a 12-minute delay changed the fate of an empire. Holland Quinn walked in as a maid and walked out as a queen. If you enjoyed this twisted tale of romance, danger, and deception, make sure to smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. What did you think of Damon's bluff in the club? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, keep reading between the lines.